Hey everybody, so I'm gonna finally go over this periodization video series that I wanted to do, or I asked about a few months ago back in November. I think it was like November 4th or 5th. I put out a post on periodization and then a story asking if you wanted to see how I worked periodization into certain clients' plans. This was in response to a post that I saw come out about periodization not being important, or a list of reasons why you would not use periodization with a personal training client, we would say. And I totally disagree with that, and I want to go over some of that in this video series. So this is going to be a three-part series where today I'm just going to talk about what periodization is, why it's important, things like that, maybe common misconceptions, and then I'll have a video 2 and a video 3 going over some examples of this, and maybe I'll even go beyond that if there's some good feedback that we want to go over with more questions. So let's get to it. Periodization, what is it? I'm not going to get or look up or give you the Merriam-Webster dictionary version or what you would see in a sports science research paper, because you can look that up on your own. Realistically, it's just how I interpret it, and it is just segmented periods of time organized through planned progressions leading towards a targeted outcome, right? So we have this overall subject or thing that we're trying to accomplish, and we break it down and then build it back up with planned progressions, right? So some people might think that that's a reductionist concept, and to a degree it really is, but it allows us to actually kind of scientifically approach this process rather than going through it and then always having to just look back and see what worked for that process. You can actually develop methods from doing it this way and enhance your coaching as you move along, and then people can share, cross-share from organization to organization or out into books and articles and research, and it obviously increases your ability to coach people more effectively. Why is it important? Simply put, goals. People have targeted outcomes, right? They're looking to achieve something. If somebody gives you a goal, whether it's subjective or objective, it's just something that they want to work towards, then that's why it's important, realistically. Because if you have a certain goal that you're aiming for and you have no idea what inputs to put in there, it's just going to become random. Now, randomization, a controlled randomization, is actually a variable of periodization that you could use. It's a little bit more advanced and complex, and I probably won't be going over that in this video series, but I'm not talking about that. I'm referring more to the randomization we might refer to as just throwing things in the hopper, seeing what comes out at the other end. There's no actual thought process that goes into the targeted outcome, okay? So, I mean, it's just super important to be giving people a targeted approach, a thoughtful approach in their plan. Progressions are built based off of that, and that's what goes into the periodization plan. So we know things that have worked with certain populations, certain scenarios, things like that, as more science and research comes out, and it allows us to upgrade our coaching. If you want to learn a little bit more about how we at Revival Strength design progressions or put progressions or the thought behind the progressions, you can go ahead and look at our webinar that Marcus put out a couple weeks ago, and I'll go over that in pretty good detail for you. Some common misconceptions that we'll see. The reason I'm bringing this up is because right now there's a lot of people kind of arguing back and forth online about, is periodization important or is it not? Is it only good for these certain people? Is it only important for these types, or not important for these types of people? And I think it's important for absolutely everybody and everybody that you're working with if you are actually coaching somebody. So these are some common misconceptions. One, it has to be written out in some sophisticated Excel format. Like, you have to come up with this tutor bumpa Excel graph with undulating lines of volume and intensity and plan stages. You don't need all that. You could write everything down on a whiteboard, just all the information you need, take a snapshot of it, boom. You can do it very sophisticated. You can come up with any format you need. You just want to have a plan, right? Some people can kind of think of it in their head. If you're a personal training client, you get to see somebody constantly, weekly, and you just take some notes down. Hey, you're working some form of periodization. Doesn't need to be super sophisticated. Another one, must use a popular method, right? Some people think periodization are these methods. Periodization isn't. It's a principle-based approach to something, and people have created methods based off of that. So for example, block linear conjugate. So those are very popular forms of periodization. Some of them are very old with updated research now. Some of these aren't used as much, or some are used differently. But this is what people think they are. So when they don't work for somebody, or it's complicated, or they don't understand it, they think, oh, periodization doesn't work. There's tons of other methods, and the new ones that we're starting to see come out recently or in the past decade, it's based off of the principles of periodization. They aren't what periodization is, they're based off of that. And then lastly, on my list at least, only useful for athletes or objective-based goals. It's a lot easier, I should say, to create a periodized plan for somebody who has a outcome that you can easily see. Right? We need to accomplish this by this time. These are the dates of things that we have coming along the way. Athletes, especially professional athletes, tend to have very controlled or more controlled lifestyles than somebody who's just a working professional in life who wants to work out. So it's not just important for those, even though it's easier. It's a lot harder to understand with like a lifestyle or general population-based client, because there's a lot of factors to consider and they throw wrenches in the mix. But again, if you're good at periodization, you understand the periodization principles, you'll be able to work with that on an ongoing basis. If you want to learn a lot more about this and get deeper into the details, because I'm definitely not going to do that, you can definitely look up some books. Tudor Bompa's, actually I have them right here, Periodization. This is a really good book. It's super thick, obviously. That's a really good book. Super Training, also by Mel Siff. Tons of good information on that as well. And then there's tons of other books that you could be looking up from Verkhoshansky and some of those guys, and Charlie Francis, things like that. I would dive into those books. Research online, articles, and then definitely practice. Once you understand the principles, you maybe practice with some known methods, then you can start playing around with your own methods. So what's next in this video series? So what I want to do for video 2, video 3 is I'm going to start off with giving you examples of how I create a periodization plan for an objective-based athlete. So it's very simple to learn that way. I think it's best to learn that way when it's something that's easier to understand. You don't have too many interferences coming in to distract you from what the standard approach is. And then the third video is where the meat and potatoes of this whole series is going to lie. It's an example of a subjective, what we call it, revival strength, look good, move well, or LGMW clients, people who are typically working professionals and want to improve their, whether it's performance or aesthetics or health or just fitness levels in general. This is where a lot of people think that this is not important because either they don't know how to do it or they just get very confused. And that's where I want to maybe give you the best inputs that I can, that I use to make this a successful process for clients.